my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is in partnership with Needed. There's overwhelming evidence that higher standards of nutrition support fertility, birth outcomes, and lifelong health. Unfortunately, the prenatal vitamin industry is failing us, leaving 95% of us depleted during one of the most nutritionally demanding times in our life. Most prenatal vitamins only provide bare minimum nutrition, while Needed goes beyond bare minimums with products that can meet the needs of our minds, bodies, and babies. I feel confident recommending Needed because their products are rigorously third-party tested and endorsed by over 10,000 women's health experts. Needed's prenatal multivitamin comes in two forms, capsules or a delicious vanilla powder. In addition to the prenatal multivitamin, Needed has created bundle options to meet your needs, not only during different stages of pregnancy, but also while trying to conceive and postpartum. As a mom of 3, I especially love their collagen, pre- and probiotics, and cognitive support supplements. Head over to thisisneeded.com to find your perfect bundle. I've talked to so many Birth Hour listeners who have discovered Needed through the podcast, and I love hearing the feedback that they are feeling better during pregnancy since starting with Needed. Use code BIRTHHOUR for 20% off your first order and up to 40% off monthly plans at thisisneeded.com. Since this discount applies to your first order only, I always recommend going with one of the plans for the best value. At the end of this episode, I talked to Ryan, co-founder of Needed, about Needed's recent clinical study results and what makes their products really stand out, so stay tuned for that conversation at the end of this episode. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth, because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another great way to be part of the Birth Hour community is by supporting us over on Patreon. So by pledging your support each month at the $5 a month level, you can get access to all of our archived episodes, so over 800 additional episodes not in the main podcast feed, as well as our private Facebook group that has such a great backlog of information. Just using that search bar, you can get almost any question answered, and you're going to find really supportive people there that are going to become your friends. And in addition to that, we do monthly Zoom calls. Just go over to patreon.com/Birth Hour and become a Patreon member and come see what it's all about. It's just $5 a month. You can get an even bigger discount. If you want to do an annual membership, you'll see that option there. And there's also an option to get it as a gift. So if you have a friend or a mother-in-law or somebody asking you what they can get you to help you prepare for baby, maybe you want a Birth Hour Patreon membership so that you can listen to more and more birth stories and find great community. So again, head over to patreon.com/Birth Hour to get started with that. Today's birth story guest is Isabella, and she's going to share her experience with pregnancy and birth, and then she also really wants to talk about her experience with postpartum and having an initial postpartum high, or baby pinks, as she learned it was called, which was new to me, and that lasted for 6 weeks, and then she experienced a significant drop in her mood, and so she talks about how she's been struggling with mental health after that initial high. All right, let's hear from Isabella. Hi, Isabella. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we get to your story, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah. So me and my husband are both 22. We're both Cancers. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I like to bake and paint and just tinker around with things.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about your journey to getting pregnant.
Yeah, so we decided in June that we wanted to start, we call it casually trying. So we weren't tracking anything. I had a chemical pregnancy in August. So we were kind of like, well, we'll wait and we'll try again in October. But it turns out that I got pregnant right after that. So in September, I tested at the end of the month and I got pregnant, and we found out a few days before our 5-year anniversary, so that was kind of fun. Then we waited and we told all of my family around 7 weeks because I was going on a trip with them and my husband wasn't going to be able to come. So I was like, well, if I get any weird symptoms, I'd rather have everyone know than not. And I ended up actually having like a really, really easy pregnancy. I didn't deal with any morning sickness or anything like that. The only weird thing that I got was these like really vivid, crazy dreams. And they usually entailed like me getting attacked or something and my husband sitting there and being like, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Oh no.
But other than that, I mean, it was kind of fun to tell everyone. I think the only issue that I had is anytime I would tell specifically like a couple who had already had kids that I was pregnant, their initial question would always be, well, how's the pregnancy been going so far? And it was always a little isolating being like, I'm not having any symptoms. This is really easy. Because I always got looks of like, oh, well, aren't you lucky?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the only other thing that kind of was a little bit shocking, I guess, was I really didn't connect with being pregnant at all. Like, I never got that, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant, it's a miracle, or it's so magical. It was like, oh, I'm pregnant and this is inconvenient. And so it was just a little bit of like, I don't know, yeah, like I connected with the idea of having a baby after the fact, but the thought of like, I have a baby inside of me just did not like register at all, basically.
Interesting. Okay. And then what about planning for your birth? Did you have an idea of what kind of birth you wanted? Yeah.
So I really wanted a natural birth. I listened to, honestly, just a lot of this podcast and just I did a lot of social media searching for people who had given birth just to kind of know what I should be expecting. And it did help a lot. I did a little bit of hypnobirthing and stuff. Nothing really set in stone. I was kind of free with my birth plan, but I wanted to do my best to go all natural if possible. Around, I want to say like 30, 32 weeks, I started getting really crappy prodromal labor. So I basically all the time, starting at around like 2:00 in the afternoon, I would just start getting contractions consistently and they would go away in like the morning, but it never really turned into anything. And so everyone kept telling me, oh, well, you know, if you're having this, you're going to go into labor soon. He's going to come early. And I was like, oh my goodness, that would be amazing. But now you're getting my hopes up. So yeah, I was kind of planning for a natural birth, but I was open to the idea of an epidural if needed. And I wanted to prevent a C-section as much as possible. But I was also like, sometimes it's unavoidable and I'd rather plan for worst case scenario than not. The other thing that I kind of struggled with was my midwife. So I live in kind of the middle of nowhere. So we have like male OBGYNs, and then we had like one singular female OB and then one midwife that was in the line with the hospital that we have. And I really didn't want a male practitioner. So Originally I went with the OB and I just didn't love it. So then I switched over to the midwife and she was nice and I thought she understood kind of what I wanted, but I didn't ever feel super like confident with her. I think the thing that I prepared for most of all was less connecting with the practitioner and more connecting with myself and understanding how my body works and just understanding that regardless of who is there to help, I am the one going through this, so I need to understand what that is going to look like for me. So I just did a lot of research into what giving birth looks like for a lot of people. I did a ton of research into like the different stages and baby's positioning and my positioning. And I just really wanted to connect so that nothing was going to be a surprise. And even if I got into labor and I was like, I don't love this or I don't love this, I could still feel confident and comfortable knowing that I knew what was going to be happening to me.
Gotcha.
So I hit like 40 weeks and I was like, I am done with this. I had been taking like red raspberry leaf tea and nettle leaf tea, and both of those are like uterine or like muscular support. And so I was really hoping that if I just prepared my uterus enough, it would just shoot the baby out of me really early. But obviously that does not happen that way. But so at like 40 weeks, I went in and I got checked. I was like 60 to 80% effaced. He was at like a +2 station. And then I was like, well, can you do a membrane sweep? And they were like, no, we're going to have to wait a little bit. And I was like, great. So I went home and I did all of the stretches possible. And I was like, every time anyone goes home and thinks that it's not going to happen, it's going to happen. So I'm going to go home and not think it's going to happen. And then I proceeded to do that for the next 5 days. And nothing happened. So I had another appointment and it was like my lunch break. So I went in for the appointment. I was like, do whatever you can to jumpstart this thing. So they gave me like a really deep membrane sweep and I did like squats on the way to the appointment and on the way back. And I went back to work after that. And I was just like, you know what? We're just going to ignore it and hope that things start happening. About like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I started getting contractions. They weren't super consistent, but they were definitely contractions. And I was like, that's interesting, but I've been feeling this for weeks now, so it's probably nothing. So I left. My desk was like a mess when I left. And I went to TJ Maxx after work at like 5 o'clock because I needed a new trash can. So I'm walking through the store and the contractions are really picking up. And I'm like, I should probably time this. And so I started timing it and they were coming pretty consistently. And so I was like, okay, well, that's interesting, but I'm not going to make a big deal about it. So I went back home and I'm hanging out and I tried eating some food, but it was just not happening. I feel like after the fact, I should have tried a little harder to eat, but hindsight's 2020. So I'm in labor and I'm still gaslighting myself. I'm still like, this is definitely not labor. I'm going to go into work tomorrow because it was a Monday. I was like, I'm going to go into work tomorrow and I'll be like totally fine. And everyone is just going to be like, wow, you're still coming into work. And so I think I ended up going to bed around like 10 p.m. because the contractions were still happening. And I was like, I'm just going to sleep it off. And if it's real labor, I won't be able to sleep. I didn't even tell my husband because I was like, I just don't want to, I don't want to disturb him if it's nothing. And I don't want him to get panicked. So about like 1 p.m., I wake up and I can't really sleep through the contractions anymore. So I'm just kind of laboring at home. I have a birth ball, so I was just bouncing on that and kind of dealing. And then around like 2:30, 3 in the morning, my water breaks, but it was kind of like I just all of a sudden peed myself. And so I was like, that's interesting, but women pee themselves during birth, so that's probably what it is. It's probably nothing. So I went to the bathroom and I put a pad on, and it was like kind of pink and chunky, but I had already lost my mucus plug. So I was like, well, I know it's not that, but I'm just going to ignore it and we'll just see how things are. But I'm going to note just in case like we go in and I have to go in for a C-section or something. So I make a note of that, and my husband's still sleeping because I was like, this is totally nothing. I don't want him to wake up if we're both going to have to go into work tomorrow. So I'm just kind of laboring at home alone in the living room, trying to be really quiet. And I think around like 4 o'clock, I try having a bowl of cereal because I was like, at this point, I'm starving. I didn't eat dinner and I haven't had anything at all. And I am so hungry. So I pour myself a bowl of cereal and I take one bite. And I was like, yep, this isn't happening. So I wake up my husband and I'm like, hey, so by the way, I think my water broke. Don't panic. It's probably nothing. I'm probably just like over exaggerating. Do you want to finish this bowl of cereal? Because I don't want to waste it. So he gets up and he's a little confused and starts eating the cereal. And then he starts putting things together. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I think my water broke, but there's also a chance I just peed myself. Who knows? We're not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep trying to deal and we'll just go to work. And if it's real labor, I'll for sure know. And so it's probably at this point like 5 in the morning. And I was like, well, I haven't gotten any sleep and I can't really get anything. And these contractions are getting like way worse. And mind you, my app has been saying like, go to the hospital for like 4 hours at this point. And I'm like, it's totally lying. I just could not be convinced that I was in labor. So eventually he was like, well, we should probably go in. So I call ahead and I'm like, hey, I don't really know if it's anything. This is what my app has been saying. And I think my water might have possibly broken already, but who knows? And they were like, okay, well, you can come in and check and we'll let you know. So I email my boss and I'm like, hey, I don't think it's anything. I might be a little late to work. And I start packing the hospital bag because I was like, there's no way I'm giving birth anytime soon. I'm just going to wait to pack it until we have to go in for my induction because my induction was like that Friday. So now it's Tuesday. I'm like 40 weeks and 6 days and I've been laboring consistently since like 4 or 5 p.m. on like the following day. So I've been in labor for like 12 hours and we go in and they check and the nurse was like, yeah, your water has definitely broken. I can feel his hair and you're like 4.5 centimeters. And I was like, great, please don't send me home. And then my midwife comes in and she checks and she was like, well, you are progressing, but your water has not broken. So like you can stay and we will think about breaking your water at around noon if that's okay. And I was like, sure, but I think it's already broken. So I'm just laboring in the hospital room. And a little bit later, probably around like 7 in the morning, they come in to place the IV. This was probably the worst part of my birth in total. They attempted to place this IV 7 different times. And each time they're like, okay, get on the bed, sit really still, don't move, and we're going to try and place this IV. And so they try and place it and they're digging around and they can't find the vein. So then they take it out and then they're like, oopsies, well, let's try again. And they ended up blowing it out like 6 times. They had to get like a special machine to place it. And the whole time I'm like sobbing because I'm contracting and I can't move. And they're just going at it, sticking me with needles. And each time they do it, they're just like, oops, sorry. And
Oh
I'm like,
my
okay.
gosh, so frustrating.
Yeah. So, and I think at the last time when they were trying to place it, I was like, if you don't get it, I'm just not going to have an IV because I'm not dealing with this again. And she was like, okay, I guess the pressure's on. So they finally placed the IV and I'm just laboring and they don't have anything like flowing to it. So I'm not hooked up to anything at all, but probably like once an hour or like every other hour they come in and they just do like 10 or 15 minutes of monitoring. And then they take all the monitors off and I'm good to just move around and labor freely. So around noon, my midwife comes back in and she checks me and she's like, you're like 5.5 centimeters. You are progressing, but you're progressing a little slowly. Let's break those waters. And I was like, well, I think they've already broken and I'm leaving like a trail of water everywhere I go, basically. I can't just be consistently peeing myself. And she's like, well, you probably are. So let's try and break your water. So I was like, okay, fine. So she tries to do it like 5 different times. And like I had already said, my water had broken. And she was like, huh, that is so interesting. I guess it had broke. I was like, yeah, I told you. So at this point, things kind of stall out. I felt him move up when they were trying to break the water. And so he kind of wiggled into a position and I could not for the life of me get him to readjust at all. I tried like laboring on like my hands and knees and I tried like squatting and on the birth ball and I tried a ton of stuff and he was not moving. So at about like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I was like, I want this epidural because I would rather try and get things moving with an epidural than go in for an emergency C-section and struggle with an epidural at that point. And so my midwife comes back in and she checks me and she's like, yep, things haven't progressed. I can call for that epidural. And so I was like, okay. And my husband at this point was like, because he was there and he was kind of helping with counter pressure and stuff. The minute my midwife left, I kind of started crying and he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I really wanted to do this naturally, but I really want to avoid a C-section. And I just feel like if she hadn't tried breaking my water, I would have been able to already have given birth. And he was doing his best to comfort me, but I was also just so far gone at that point that nothing he could have said was going to make it any better. So eventually the guy comes in and he gives me the epidural. And from that point on, I had the worst shakes. I mean, I know I had heard about like labor shakes and stuff, but it was so bad. Like the bed was shaking and I couldn't stop. And everyone kept coming in and being like, it's completely normal. And I was just trying to trust everyone. They started putting me in different positions and I finally was able to start eating some food and stuff. So I got things moving along and at around midnight, I was fully dilated and able to start pushing. And so I got the epidural about 24 hours in. And then at about 30 hours-ish is when I started pushing. And they were like, well, let's try and do a few practice pushes because first-time moms never know the correct way to push. And so I was like, okay. And my midwife tried having me lay fully on the bed. And I was like, I do not want to be on my back. That is the one position I would like to avoid. I don't think it's going to be beneficial. I would like to, if possible, be in like a squatting or a semi-upright position. So she was a little against it, but I kind of fought for it. And she eventually gave in and we kind of positioned me into like a half squat, half laying down sort of a thing. And so I do one practice push and she's like, oh, he's coming. And so my husband gets ready and he gowns up and stuff. And I do like one more push and she's like, okay. So he goes down there and he grabs the baby's head and I do one final push and he's out. And all in all, it was about like 18 minutes of pushing. And as he's coming out, I'm like, am I tearing? And my midwife was like, no, I don't think so. So he comes out and he's on my chest and we're doing some golden hour. And I do one final push and the placenta comes out. And I was like, please tell me I didn't tear. And she was like, no, there's no tearing at all. I don't know how you did that. And then my immediate next question was, well, did I poop? And she was like, nope. There was no tearing and there was no poop or anything. And then I kept asking my husband because I, of course, couldn't believe her. I was like, well, everyone does this. It's normal. I want to know. And everyone was like, no, you didn't. And I eventually went back and I looked at like the medical records and stuff. And I, in fact, did not tear or poop or anything. And they didn't give me any stitches. And so after that, the epidural wore off within like, I want to say 30 minutes to an hour. So I got up, I went to the bathroom. And while I did that, they did all the baby stuff where they like weighed him and checked his measurements and everything. And he was all good and I was all good. So we did like some latching and he was latching pretty great, but he just wasn't hungry. So I walked us all over to the postpartum room. And the first few nights I was like, wow, this is so great. I wasn't very sore. It was kind of just like a bad period. And then we like went home the next day and in the hospital, he was latching great. And so I was like, this is amazing. But when we got home, he kind of stopped latching. And I realized after the fact, after like a week or two, that the reason he wasn't latching was because I was overproducing so much. And I have such a strong letdown that anytime I would try and latch him, he would latch and get a suck in, and then I would just end up choking him out. So it was just way too much, way too quickly. And so I started basically exclusively pumping. And that was nice just to understand what I was producing and what that looked like. And my husband was able to help out and feed him and stuff. Something that I realized after the fact was that I had gotten the postpartum pangs. So I did a ton of research after the fact just to understand kind of how I felt. But directly after birth, I was like, wow, I feel great. Like I felt probably the best that I have ever felt. I was running on little to no sleep and you couldn't tell. I was up and about. I walked around for like 3 hours at our mall less than a week after giving birth because I needed new clothes. And I like didn't even feel it. I was flying high. And basically what baby pinks are is one big manic episode. So rather than the baby blues where you feel depressed and gradually get better, you feel really manic and really high and really amazing. And then it just crashes at like 6 or so weeks. So that's kind of what happened to me. I just kind of was like, wow, this is so easy. I don't understand how so many people struggle so much postpartum when I'm feeling 100%. And I like stopped bleeding after about 2 weeks. And I was just kind of able to pick up life as normal. Like I kept our house clean. I was doing the dishes and like making dinner and stuff and pumping and feeding and doing all the things. And I was like, I am literally Wonder Woman. This is so good. Like, wow, I should just be popping babies out left and right. And then I would say about like 6 or so weeks, I kind of crashed and I went into this kind of depressive spiral where I was just like, oh my goodness, why do I feel this way? Like, my life is over. I've got nothing. Like, I'm stuck with a baby now and I don't even feel like myself. And now I have to care for this whole other human being. And like, why did I do this? What am I doing? And it was really challenging, especially since I don't really have any mom friends or anything. So I tried connecting with my friends and just being like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I feel. And they would try their best to comfort me, but it was just kind of isolating because no one really understood, especially since by 6 weeks, people just kind of expect that the hormones have ended and if you were feeling great, you'll continue feeling great, or if you were feeling bad, you'll get better. And it was kind of like I just went from being on top of the world to just being in like the lowest depths of despair. And it was just really, really challenging to work through. And at that point, I had went back to work, which just made everything worse. Because then I was like, I'm not with my baby and he needs me. And what if something happened to him and no one is calling me because they don't want to freak me out? And it was just a lot of like irrational anxiety around what if he needs me or what if something happened to him and I'm not there and all he knows is me, but I've completely left him on a ledge all by himself with this not random, but random person. And so it was just really challenging. And after about a month of being back at work, I just told them that I couldn't do it and I would need to be home with my baby. So at that point, I quit and I came back home. And I've now just been at home. And the anxiety definitely got better since being at home because obviously if something happens to him, I know it and I'm right here and stuff. So that's helped. But the depression it's just been challenging. And I'm just doing my best to keep open communications with everyone around me because the biggest thing that I think is important, not even just for me, but for everyone else, is just for them to understand that you don't have to be okay to be okay. So I've been just updating like my sisters and stuff, and they've been really helpful, and they've been really doing their best to reach out and make sure that I'm okay, and they check in with me throughout the day. And things have been getting like better on the depression side.
Good.
I've been taking some herbal supplements to help with my cortisol levels. So that has been helping because I'm just de-stressing and working through it. And I think the other thing that really helped was I'm a very logical person. So I did a ton of research at like 8 weeks. I was like, why do I feel this way? And so I did a ton of research into like the baby blues. And I had offhandedly, I think a month or two before I even got pregnant, seen one singular TikTok talking about the baby pinks. And I just kind of threw it in the back of my head. And so at about 8 weeks, I was like, you know what, let me research anything that I can possibly think of that could be associated with this. And so I found that one TikTok again, and then I went on a deep dive. And so I looked through a ton of social media, and there was very little information about like what it was and how it affected people. And then I did a deep dive in Google, and I was like, what can I do and what should I do to educate myself and to feel better about where I was? So that's kind of when I found out like me feeling so high and so amazing and like I was on top of the world post-birth, as much as it's an adrenaline thing for the first few days, it is not consistent. And if you continue feeling that way, then you probably should check in with someone and just monitor that, because the baby pinks can be really hard to recognize and then even harder to manage, because when you hit that hormone drop where it all goes away, rather than feeling like really bad and then gradually feeling better, you just went from feeling really amazing to really terrible. And so being able to research it and realize like other people feel this way and I'm not alone in this, and not that it's normal, but it's normal and I'm going to get back to a place where I feel good, has been really motivational. And then also just realizing like, just because I feel maybe not the best mentally doesn't mean I have to live in it. So I made a routine. So I get up and get outside every day. And even if I spend my whole day sitting in my pajamas in the living room playing with my baby, at the very least, I'm not in the bedroom sulking and I'm doing other things that can help me and is helping my baby. And I'm putting a lot of my energy into just feeling good physically, because I know eventually it'll translate to mentally feeling good as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. You know, I'm always learning something new on the podcast. I had not heard of postpartum pinks before. You know, we talk about like this initial birth high, but for it to kind of last for 6 weeks and then completely change, I'm sure that was really difficult and unexpected.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that was kind of hard was because I was feeling so amazing, I never really felt that like connection with like my baby. So I knew that I loved him and stuff, and I knew that I connected with him. But it was also this weird disconnect because I was like, I should be more impacted by what I went through and I should feel different, but I didn't. I just kind of felt like, wow, everything is just returning to normal. I just now have a baby on my hip. And then once I hit that drop, that's when I felt connected to him, because I was like, okay, so this did change me and I'm not the same. And that's kind of when I was like, okay, I'm connecting with him mentally and physically and stuff now, but now I'm also feeling like the worst I've ever felt.
Yeah, that's so tough.
Yeah. And then I think at about 12 weeks postpartum, he was about 3 months old, is when I figured out my like oversupply and how to manage it. So I'm still overproducing, but I've been like decreasing my supply slowly. So that has been helping limit just the overall aggressive letdown that I have. So he was able to start latching. So now I pump maybe once or twice a day, but he exclusively nurses. So I think that has also been helping with everything, because rather than having to deal with making a bottle and cleaning a bottle and cleaning a billion pump parts and bagging tons of milk, I only really have to worry about getting him latched and then pumping right before bed and stuff. So that has been really helping, I think, also just mentally, because it just takes things off of my plate, and being able to just be really open about my mental health with everyone around me. Even if it's someone that I don't necessarily know, if they ask how I'm doing, I don't sugarcoat it. And if I'm like, yeah, I'm really struggling, do you want to help me do the dishes?
Good.
That has been helpful. And I think people don't expect it either, because I'm pretty self-sufficient. I like to do things and just keep things my way and do it myself. But just understanding that if someone asks if they want to help and they ask how they can help, even if they don't want to help, they're the one offering. So I'm going to take it without remorse.
Good.
And so that has just been, it's been nice. And it's been nice to build a support system with people that I wouldn't have necessarily expected.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, what resources do you want to share?
I think basically listen to every single one of these episodes that I possibly could.
Good.
But I think just if you have any sort of a question or anything, looking it up is the best option, and researching as much as you possibly can with as many different sources as possible.
All right. And then where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah. So my Instagram is Isabella_Moum. So IZZABELLA_MOUM. And you can reach out to me through that or through like the podcast.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much again for sharing, Isabella.
Yeah, thank you.
Now I'm going to talk to Ryan, co-founder of Needed, about their recent IRB study results and all of the great products from Needed. Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to chat with me about Needed again.
Bryn, I'm so excited to be back.
Awesome. Well, before we get into all of the new things happening over at Needed, can you just share with my listeners a little bit about who you are and your role at Needed?
Absolutely. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Needed.
All right. So I recommend Needed to my listeners, my followers on Instagram all the time. I've been using the products for over a year now. And I just really love that with your perinatal products, you really go beyond the bare minimum. And it's just really important, especially for the people in my audience, because we know that during the stages of life where you're growing babies and feeding babies are especially nutritionally demanding. So I love that you guys are addressing these nutrient deficiencies and talking about now that not all prenatal vitamins are created equally. And on that note, your team just released the results of an IRB study highlighting these differences between standard prenatal vitamins versus Needed. Can you just talk a little bit more about this?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited. This has been a baby of mine for a while.
Yeah.
But basically, there is overwhelming evidence that proper nutrient levels can improve fertility, birth outcomes, and the trajectory of life for both mother and baby thereafter. Mm-hmm. Yet, as we all know, despite our little kind of communities, nutrition has not been front and center in the perinatal standard of care. And most prenatals on the market provide bare minimum nutrition support. We're designing and conducting studies to add to the clinical literature to unequivocally prove that women deserve more support, resources, and radically better nutritional care. We really just fundamentally think the evidence just cannot be ignored anymore, as the lack of nutritional support is really failing women and children. So our goal for this study specifically was to take a more comprehensive look at nutritional status in pregnancy. The study compared nutritional characteristics between women taking the Needed prenatal multi and a standard prenatal vitamin.
Okay. We
collected survey data and analyzed nutrient biomarkers, so nutrient levels actually in the blood themselves, in a diverse group of 235 adult pregnant women across 7 U.S. states. And what's really exciting and what you're hinting towards is that the results actually revealed quite striking insights into how maternal nutrition status differs by the type of prenatal vitamin a woman is taking during pregnancy. Specifically, we found that women taking the Needed prenatal multi had higher blood levels of key nutrients for pregnancy, including vitamin D, B6, selenium, and zinc, among a number of others. When we compared prenatal subgroups, we found that only the group of women taking the Needed multi had sufficient blood levels of vitamin D and vitamin B6 compared to the group taking the standard prenatal. And nutrients like vitamin D and B6 play key roles in pregnancy in supporting both maternal and baby health outcomes. So it's really exciting. And it's also important to reiterate that our study was diverse And the prenatal groups were comparable on several key factors outside of their prenatal vitamins. This is really important for the rigor of the study. So for example, 1/3 of the women in each group identified as a race ethnicity other than white, and women in both groups were in similar stages of their pregnancy.
Okay, and what does the IRB part mean?
The IRB is the Institutional Review Board, and they're basically a committee that reviews clinical research involving human subjects to ensure that certain ethical standards are met.
Okay, it's super important when studying pregnant women.
Super important when studying pregnant women, and in terms of showing proper kind of rigor and study design went into the methodology of how we conducted the research as well.
Right. So one thing that I thought was interesting is that a lot of this past studies weren't even done on pregnant women or even women. Oftentimes it was like based on white men as far as vitamin levels and things like that. So as you mentioned, these are really striking results. And what does this really mean for women in the trying to conceive or pregnancy or postpartum season of life? Like, what should we be taking away from this data?
You're right that sort of there is a lot of missing gaps in the research, though we also have found that there is a lot of really good research emphasizing the need for better nutrition at this stage of life. But overall, we see this study as adding to the growing body of evidence showing that, one, meeting nutritional needs through diet alone is very challenging in modern context. So supplementation is needed. Two, that most pregnant women in the U.S. fail to meet dietary recommendations for certain key nutrients that are very important for pregnancy, like vitamin D. And third, I think increased evidence that standard prenatals are really falling short in closing the gap between nutritional needs and dietary intake. And overall, we hope this study leads to more clinicians and moms advocating for the nutrition that is needed for a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, and I've been sharing about this with my followers on Instagram from some of the data you guys are talking about. And one thing I thought was really interesting was the statistic about how few care providers are discussing nutrition with pregnant and postpartum women at all.
Yeah, that is absolutely striking. We found that nearly 80% of women reported receiving little to no nutritional advice from their OBGYN during their pregnancy care.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up on the podcast a lot because I feel like people really notice a difference when they have midwifery care versus OBGYNs because nutrition is something that's talked about in these much longer prenatal appointments and things like that. So yeah, it's a big part of feeling good throughout pregnancy. And I know that one thing that Needed really focuses on as well is that it's not just during pregnancy, but also postpartum. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
We equate it in a lot of ways to nutritional depletion, and that a lot of the importance for this life stage is in avoiding depletion. So meaning when your body lacks the essential vitamins, minerals, or other nutrients that are really needed for optimal function. And depletion is not something that occurs only through pregnancy, but women are more vulnerable in critical life stages such as pregnancy and breastfeeding. So that postpartum stage that you mentioned right there. And a lot of the problem is that women go into pregnancy already depleted and then increase their depletion in growing baby, so end up in a pretty tough spot postpartum. Mm-hmm. There are many contributors to this depletion, from nutrient deficient soil and stress. And then the signs of depletion like brittle nails, fatigue, headaches, mood changes, thinning hair, constipation, dry skin, all sound pretty familiar to us, right? Mm-hmm. And really research suggests that up to 95% of women experience nutritional depletion even when they are on a prenatal vitamin.
Oh my gosh.
Depletion is, I think, a much bigger problem than we actually, have historically given it credit. And a lot of us, women just assume we have to feel these things, these signs of depletion, just as part of our, that's just the status quo. That's how it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of our sort of emphasis is showing that no, radically better is possible. There are ways to better support ourselves through nutrition to minimize those signs of depletion.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to someone recording their birth story, and they were saying how, they were super focused on their nutrition during pregnancy, and then it kind of fell to the wayside postpartum. And it's like especially if you're breastfeeding, it's taking a lot of energy and nutrients, and then you're also sleep deprived because you have a new baby. So the depletion, I think, like you mentioned, is just something we really need to focus on beyond pregnancy.
Yeah, and most care providers aren't really reminding folks. They think of it as like a prenatal, not a perinatal.
Right.
There are some postnatals that exist, but I think the use of them in that breastfeeding life stage that is actually more nutritionally intensive than pregnancy is a non-supported part of this life stage. And, where we see so many women really talking about that postpartum period being the most difficult. And I think being able to advocate and raise awareness to better support and how do we care for mom, not just care for baby during that stage is very important.
Yes, I'm just like nodding along to everything over here. So are there any other supplements that women should consider outside of a prenatal to help fight depletion?
Absolutely. So most prenatals and aren't included are vitamin and mineral blends. And there are many other nutrients that are supportive of combating nutrition. Unfortunately, we just don't think that there's a single product that can fully get you over the hill on depletion lack. So it needed what we are really focused on rather than just a single product that we do hero our prenatal multi a lot, but really an emphasis on a system of products is most supportive. And for example, we do offer an omega-3 DHA EPA add-on. So DHA omega is often something that you probably do hear as part of taking that alongside your prenatal. And DHA and EPA are very supportive of a healthy pregnancy. Sometimes they are combined with a prenatal multi, but we often see that can lead to kind of lack of nutrient integrity or too low of doses. So we do think it is important to offer it as a separate product for that reason, but do advocate for that being added on to your system of products. And then there's a whole host of other products depending on needs. I personally really love our sleep support. As lack of sleep is a big contributor to depletion. And I also really love our breastfeeding safe cognitive support product. It's a product that really helps me sort of feel like me and try to do it all by being a working mom while still, breastfeeding and chasing after my kids. Being able to focus when I need to focus is a critical part of that.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of that one as well. So you guys offer several bundles and things like that with these add-ons. Where's the best place for people to start if they're trying to decide what's right for them?
Our website does help to guide you by sort of life stage or need, which is thisisneeded.com, or we're at Needed on Instagram. And we actually have a team of trained nutritionists and doulas as part of our customer support team. So they're eager and ready to help if you do want to sort of DM us or email us if you kind of get stuck on the website your own. So that's a great place to start. And then I'd also really recommend folks to go to thisisneeded.com/thrive to learn more about the prenatal study and the rigor that went into it and a lot more results beyond what we're able to share today.
Yes, it's so fascinating. And I'm the same way. Like I can't squeeze it all in to share on Instagram either. And so I'm like, please go check it out because it really is amazing what you guys were able to find out from this study. And I love that people are available in the DMs to help guide because I feel like it can be really overwhelming when choosing your prenatal. And starting with the main prenatal is obviously a great choice, but I know lots of people want to take advantage of these bundles too. So that's great to know that it's available to DM or email.
Yeah, I think we're here to help, and it's really a passion of a lot of members of the team to do so. So we're excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for chatting with me about all of this. It's always great to hear what you guys are up to, and I'm always happy to share with my listeners about Needed.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much again to Isabella for sharing her story with us and to Needed for sponsoring this episode. Remember to use the coupon code BIRTHHOUR at thisisneeded.com to save up to 40% on those bundle deals. Again, this is just on your first order, so be sure and order everything you want on that first order to get that great discount. I will have other information on today's show notes page, which you can find by going to thebirthhour.com and searching for Isabella's name.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.